You're listening to the Baseball Book Club.
Okay, Leroy, there's not enough mustard in the world to cover this next hot dog.
This dog is big. It's a big dog.
It is a big dog, and this big dog's name is Mr. October, Reggie Jackson, number 59 on the countdown. And now, Leroy, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of the name Steve Chilcott?
I tell you, not until I reread this chapter. Steve Chilcott is a name that will not go down in infamy or infamy. It will just be the footnote to the player that we're about to talk about today.
That's exactly right. Unfortunately for Steve Chilcott, really all that he became was a footnote in the story of Reggie Jackson. And, we'll get to Steve soon enough. But I want to start this story of Reggie Jackson in 1969. And I'll tell you, I didn't realize he was on such a torrid pace in the first half of that 69 season, so much so that he was about to smash Babe Ruth and Roger Maris in the home run record books.
Yep, that's right. Reggie Jackson's big breakout season was in 1969, and like you mentioned, talk about a hot first half. From April to July, he hit .324 with a .444 on base average and an .852 OPS.
Ooh, 37 home runs. That was a rip-roaring 3 months.
Can you imagine what the baseball world was talking about the first half of the season? He was just going to destroy the home run record at that pace.
Oh, it had to be sizzling. Hey, here's something else, too, and I hadn't thought of this before now. The New York Mets won the World Series in 69. Reggie Jackson should have been playing for the Mets that year. Imagine how much better they would have been with Reggie Jackson.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. Neither did I. The Miracle Mets of 1969. If Reggie Jackson is a New York Met, who the year that Reggie Jackson came out of Arizona State, the Mets had the first pick of the amateur draft, which, of course, the amateur draft was kind of a new thing in the 60s, and it was the second ever amateur draft that Reggie got drafted. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, too, who the first ever first-round pick of the first ever amateur draft was.
I can't remember. I know who it was. It's escaping me.
Rick Monday.
Rick Monday. Yep. The very Rick Monday that we did a short tribute on just a few weeks ago.
Yes, sir. Rick Monday was the first ever overall pick from the first ever amateur draft. Also an Arizona State grad.
Yeah, he was a teammate to Reggie Jackson, but he was a year ahead of him.
Yes, Rick Monday, not known for being a baseball great so much as he was kind of a pinch hitter type of player and played with the Cubs and then, of course, eventually the Dodgers, which is where I know Rick Monday from.
Okay, so Rick Monday has the distinction of going first ever in the Major League Baseball amateur draft. And then the next year, in 1966, Reggie is passed over by the Mets and taken second overall by the Oakland Athletics.
That's right.
Now, listen, there are some chapters in this book that can be a bit dry on occasion, but not this one. This chapter with Reggie Jackson was so full of color. It was a really fun read. And, of course, you sprinkle in a nice dash of Charlie Finley, who was such a tool bag. And it just spices things up even more. All right, anyway, so let's wind it back even further to Reggie's early days. So he was a Philly kid, a city boy from Philadelphia. And as a child, his mom takes off after getting sick and tired of dealing with her husband.
He's what happened basically in Reggie's life is his father, Martinez Jackson, was a little bit of a philanderer in his own right and a gambler and a hyper competitive guy himself. And one day he comes home and it turns out that mom has taken half the kids and run off, and Reggie Jackson is one of the kids that got left with dad.
Yeah, I want to know what kind of mom leaves half of her kids behind.
Isn't that funny? Like, would you pick which ones are your favorites? Or
yeah, and it's not like they were old enough and it's like, hey, stay with your father. Reggie was 6.
Yeah, isn't that? Yeah, it's such a brutal detail of all of this.
It is brutal.
But at any rate, Martinez Jackson who, by the way, if you don't know Reggie's middle name, it's Reggie Martinez Jackson. Yeah. So Martinez Jackson, as Reggie's father, is, really actually kind of unaffectionate and distant from his child, except he's beaming and, very prideful about his son's athletic prowess. And so often we know that from the stories that we read, a lot of these Major League Baseball players are driven by that kind of brokenness. So many times guys will just, no matter how successful they are, like I've told a story about Rick Sutcliffe before. Great guy, he's on the television, charming personality, but as soon as he gets interviewed about his dad, his face turns red, and you can tell he's just consumed almost with resentment for the way he was treated.
It seems like so often the guys who turn out to be superstars are coming from dysfunctional situations. I imagine there's plenty of guys that come from functional families and still rise to the top, but it seems like broken homes is a common link for a lot of professional athletes.
Yeah, I don't know. Isn't that unfortunate? I think it might just be some evolutionary maximum that, trying to overcome adversity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is a fertile, growing environment for greatness. And that sucks.
It does. Yeah, it does suck. But it also makes sense. It's like a built-in motivator.
I mean, some of the most functional, amazing people that I've ever met are people who have just got brokenness in them, and it's just having to overcome that turns them into, people don't get hard by living soft lives. What is the thing you hear anymore these days? Hard times create hard men create soft times create soft men, and so the cycle continues on forever.
Yeah, essentially where there's no struggle, there's nothing to rise from.
Yep. But so Reggie was kind of one of those guys. Could have been a football player.
Yeah, a halfback, right?
Yeah, a halfback with some, and of course, if you've ever seen Reggie escape the field on the...
Oh, yeah.
Have you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, the World Series when the whole crowd is down on the field and he's like basically bowling people over just to get to the clubhouse.
Yeah, so you can see it that Reggie had the physique, he had the speed, and he was scouted by multiple college teams: Oklahoma, Michigan, Notre Dame, allegedly Alabama. Of course, this is a time too in the mid-'60s where the Civil Rights Act is passed in 64.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this, and I think it's pretty unlikely that schools like Georgia and Alabama were showing interest.
That sounds like revisionist history to kind of make those schools look a little better in retrospect than it actually was,
Mm-hmm. But Reggie had no interest in playing in the South anyway. He knew from his old man to stay away because his dad drove a Negro Leagues bus all over the South. So I'm sure Reggie heard plenty of stories, and this was pre-civil rights days.
Yeah, and I think it's something interesting to remember is that we kind of just make this line in the sand. Oh, Civil Rights Act, okay, everything's normal. Like, you don't pass legislation and change an entire culture. And so a lot of times we lionize some of these players like Doby, Frank Robinson, Jackie Robinson, these guys that played in the Negro Leagues and then made the transition into the pros, into the MLB. But you still have to take it into consideration that there was an adversity that some of these players in the 60s came up, having to kind of fend off that, well, everything was supposed to be fixed and healed and there was no more back of the bus type of Rosa Parks sorts of adversity. But that's not necessarily true.
No. Those things take decades, sometimes generations to correct. The passing of legislation is just the beginning point. But now you have, society has to adjust from doing things one way to now doing things a different way. And it takes time to correct behaviors that are entrenched.
That does. It does. It doesn't change overnight, but it takes a lot of reps. You can change the law, but to change culture, it takes hearts and minds. And that's something that, it's a different ball game.
Okay, so suffice to say, Reggie said, no thanks, don't want to play in the South. He decides to go out west. He wants to get as far away from home as he can. So he picks the exact opposite corner of the country and ends up at Arizona State. And, they have a pretty good baseball program, but he goes in as a football player.
Yeah, and he wasn't allowed to play as a freshman because I guess that was the NCAA rules back then, is that freshmen can't play varsity football. So you kind of had your red shirt season taken for you.
Yep. But more importantly, he got the okay from the athletic director to play baseball as well. And immediately he hits it off with the baseball manager at Arizona State to the point where the guy is like a father figure to Reggie. And he really begins to excel in his baseball career at this point.
Yeah, he has a prolific college baseball career at Arizona State. And as we previously mentioned, he earns himself the pole position in the second ever amateur baseball draft.
Yeah, he made a splash as a college athlete. And so it looks like, he's maybe going to go number 1 in the draft.
Yeah, top prospect on the board is Reggie Jackson, hands down. But of course, now we're getting back into the social aspect of things where it is rumored that because Reggie was dating a white woman at the time, which of course the Mets vehemently deny this in retrospect, but because Reggie was dating a white woman at the time, the Mets thought it might be a public relations issue in New York. And they decide to go a different direction.
They don't want the distraction, and they pass on Reggie Jackson, even though he's the top guy. And so Steve Chilcott enters the stage front and center. And boy, did the Mets blow this one.
Oh, and when they missed, that's really big.
Yep. The Mets take can't-miss catcher Steve Chilcott, only it didn't quite work out.
Yeah. Casey Stengel says, Stengel says this Chilcott guy, he's going to be the next Yogi Berra.
Yeah, the next Yogi Berra. Not so much. Sorry, Casey. So this leaves Reggie on the board for the second pick, and the Oakland Athletics do the right thing and take Reggie Jackson, and so begins the very interesting relationship between Reggie and Athletics owner Charlie Finley.
Yeah, that's right, which of course is not a harmonious relationship at all.
No, it wasn't. And this is kind of where the fun part of the chapter begins.
It was. Now, Poznansky opens the chapter up by explaining this mammoth home run on September 5th of 1970. His breakout season was 1969. And of course, you don't know, I mentioned he was hitting 324, 444 with an 852 OPS. I just want to give...
And this is in 1969.
In 69, yeah. And I want to give the audience a little perspective. So a 300 batting average is kind of the gold standard. If you're hitting 300 or above, you're doing pretty good. On base percentage, the gold standard is 400. If you've got an on-base average of 400, hey, that is great. If you've got a slugging percentage of 500, that is a good number. And, of course, an OPS of anything over 800 is pretty good. You got a player with a 900 OPS. That is elite.
Yeah, just to be clear, for anyone that's listening that isn't a numbers person, OPS means on-base percentage plus slugging percentage. So on-base plus slugging is OPS.
Yeah, you all 400 on-base percentage, which is including your hits, your walks, your hit by pitches, your intentional walks, anything that gets you on base, that gets calculated into your on-base percentage. And your slugging is basically how many bases per hit you actually pull off, how many total bases by plate appearances.
Right, your extra base hits, your doubles, your triples, and your home runs, which all have a greater value than just a single. So if you're hitting singles all day long, your slugging percentage will be the same as your OBP, your on base, because there's nothing extra, no extra bases to increase the slugging number.
Yeah.
Okay, so like you said, the chapter begins with Reggie's breakout season in 69. Then in the offseason, between the 69 and 70 seasons, he has a contract dispute with Charlie Finley, and he wants to get paid $60,000.
Yeah, and Charlie Finley says, I'm going to, 35 is all you're going to get out of me, $35,000.
$35,000, that's like just a little better than half of what Reggie wants. And so things turn ugly, and all of a sudden these two guys are airing things out in the public.
In the media, and that's the thing too, is this just didn't play itself out, in the locker room or in the owner's office. This played itself out in the California media and in the national media, play by play, blow by blow, which is an embarrassment to the A's organization and certainly Charlie Finley.
And Reggie loved it. He was happy to roll around in the mud and make Finley look as dirty as he could.
Oh, Reggie loved it. Charlie Finley absolutely hated it. So there's this back and forth volleying of trying to tarnish or undermine each other's reputations. So after Charlie Finley, who I think it was funny that Poznanski mentions that Charlie Finley would try and call Reggie Jackson in the middle of the night.
What a low blow. He's trying to get some verbal agreement in the middle of the night.
Yeah, to call him in the middle of the night when he's kind of in the bleary, median of being half awake and half asleep, and trying to trick him into agreeing to a contract.
What a dog. Like, hey, Reggie, what do you think of $38,000? That's a good offer. Let's get this thing hammered out.
Yeah, let's do this 30 now. Well, and so another funny side note is that they finally come to an agreement. What is it, 45,000?
Yeah.
With a caveat.
Oh, yes. I love this.
Is Charlie Finley says, I'll pay you 45 and I'll pay for your Oakland apartment.
But this was a big misstep by Charlie Finley.
Okay, when in a massive troll move,
Yeah.
What does Reggie do?
He gets the nicest apartment in town because there were no parameters on that part of the deal, and it happens to be in the same complex as Charlie Finley himself.
Yeah, so it's like it's the most expensive apartment, and it's like down the hall or in the same building as Charlie Finley's apartment. And, so there's another 10,000 just on this lavish apartment.
Yeah, so they get through this messy contract dispute, and the 1970 season begins. But Reggie's not doing so hot.
Struggling.
Yeah, he is struggling. And this gives Charlie Finley some ammunition to mistreat Reggie because he figures, hey, I'm paying this guy a lot of money. I want to see some results.
Yeah, well, by August, Charlie Finley instructs the management to bench Reggie Jackson. Don't put him in the starting lineup. If he's not going to perform and he's going to steal my money, don't put him in the starting lineup. And, of course, that just makes Reggie crazy resentful and crazy bitter.
Mm-hmm. Well, for guys like Reggie Jackson or, say, Pete Rose, they don't handle this very well at all when they're relegated to the bench. These guys know who they are. They know that they're the star of the team, and when you bench them, that's a massive blow to the ego.
It interferes too much with their vision of themselves and their mission on this earth, which is to be great. And so it's on September 5th of 1970 on Fan Appreciation Day. Of course, the A's are not having a very good season, and so there's maybe 10,000 people in the stands. It's decided that Reggie Jackson will come up to hit with the bases loaded, pinch hit in the ninth. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Reggie smacks one of the biggest bombs anyone has ever seen out of Oakland Alameda County Stadium.
Yeah, so the way it's told is he hits one out, runs the bases, and as he touches home plate, he looks up to where the owner's box is, and Charlie Finley's up there standing up, clapping like he had something to do with it, and Reggie's like, hell no, this was all me. And he throws up the one-finger salute to Charlie Finley.
Yeah, very animatedly screams, F you to Charlie Finley up in the owner's box.
A very public F you to his owner. And the newspapers go wild over this, and it all breaks loose, and the feud is back on.
Yeah, and you think, oh, well, this has got to be the end of Reggie and Oakland. And then you kind of start doing the math and realizing, wait, this happened in 1970. Didn't the Oakland A's win all those World Series in the early 70s?
Yeah, they won 3 in a row, and Reggie was a big, big part of that championship run. So somehow this wasn't the end of his time in Oakland just yet.
You talk about, you think a relationship within a franchise and with an owner absolutely ruined, but apparently they got it together. And then that's kind of the beginning of the history of those great Oakland A's teams with Joe Rudy and Gene Tennis and Reggie Jackson, just to name a few.
It had to be an icy 4 years, with Reggie and Charlie. Everybody, actually, the whole team, nobody was really crazy about Charlie. And, after they three-peated as world champions, they probably could have won more. But Charlie Finley, being a micromanaging hothead, he started trading off players and dismantled the team, and their winning ways quickly came to an end.
Charlie Finley is like one of the worst owners, and treated his players terribly in Major League Baseball history. And now here today, you've got John Fisher ruining the legacy of the Oakland A's, underpaying players. It's
a tough legacy for the Athletics. Post Connie Mack, it's been a rough, 60, 70 years.
Yeah, I mean, so you got to really appreciate those golden years in the '80s with Eckersley and McGuire and Canseco and all those cats, the Bash
Oh yeah,
brothers, and
oh yeah. It was a great club. Great club. So Reggie wins 3 championships. He wins the American League MVP in 1973. And Poznanski doesn't get into a whole lot about his time in New York after he leaves Oakland. I feel like he kind of skimmed over it a little bit.
not too much. I mean, obviously, he mentioned, in illustrating what a personality Reggie Jackson was, some of the most famous or infamous quotes from Reggie Jackson are from his time in New York. Less legendary baseball playing, but more. I mean, look, if you don't know the 3 biggest stories about Reggie Jackson when he got to New York, first one is, he says, quote to the papers, "I didn't come to New York to become a star. I brought my star with me."
What a line. That's the epitome of a superstar ego.
But that's not the one that turned the New York media against him. It made his teammates think, "Oh, well, who's this hot dog?" Right? But this quote that really set things off, and if you're ever interested in this story, it's in the book "The Bronx is Burning." It's I am the straw that stirs the drink. And what that means is that I'm the cleanup hitter and I'm the most competent hitter thing. But that's not the only bad part, because, catcher Thurman Munson was a beloved figure.
The captain.
Yeah. In Yankees lore, he was a living legend in Yankees lore. He was the new version of Yogi Berra. And Thurman Munson was such a different kind of player than Reggie Jackson. A lot more working class, a lot more limping around, playing in pain, gritty, chug a beer, in the locker room afterwards. And, Reggie Jackson is more health drinks and kind of more the modern player, which didn't endear him completely to a traditional locker room like the Yankees. But it wasn't just that he said, "I am the straw that stirs the drink." But if you continue that quote, what really turned the New York media and the locker room against Reggie was, Thurman stirs the drink, but he stirs it badly.
Ouch.
Whoa. He says this to his teammates.
Yeah, not the best move to cut your teammate down that way, and it doesn't go well for Reggie at all with his teammates.
Bad news in 78 with Reggie. It was a tough season for him. Yep, but those are the 2 major quotes. And then finally the quote, and this is my favorite, the Catfish Hunter quote, because, Reggie was such a huge star. I mean, look, you asked me who's a baseball player in the mid 70s. I'll tell you, Reggie Jackson. Like, I've said this, I think, in maybe a previous program. Baseball had changed once the televised era had come. You got to remember that baseball starts in a pre-radio era where we follow things either in the ballpark or in the paper the next day. And then radio comes around in the 20s. And now you have a news star. You have Babe Ruth. Okay. And the radio era continues. But finally, when it comes to the 60s and everybody has a color television in their home, a sport like football is more compelling suddenly because it's not statistically based. You can see a lot more going on. Well, baseball needs a new hero, a new rock star. It's the same way Joe Namath was to NFL football in 1969. Major League Baseball, they need a new hero. And Reggie provides this larger-than-life movie star, rock star kind of persona, and it's so big, partially because Reggie helps cultivate it, with his controversial moves and, his own self-promotion. And part of that self-promotion is the Reggie Bar.
Yes, the Reggie Bar.
Did you ever have a Reggie Bar? I can't remember.
No. They stopped making those. I was 6 when those got discontinued.
I knew they existed, but I don't believe I ever had a Reggie Bar either. Although Catfish Hunter at the time would say, the Reggie Bar, well, that's unique because the Reggie Bar is the only candy bar that you open up and it tells you how good it is.
How stinking great is that?
That's such an awesome one.
That is such a great quote.
Yeah, unwrap a Reggie Bar, it'll tell you how good it is.
I mean, Reggie Jackson's ego was so big.
That kind of sums up how the New York locker room, and for that matter, the media.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How did they ever win a championship in that atmosphere?
Interesting, isn't it? Like, you would think it would be such a distraction.
Yeah, toxic.
Yeah, but once again, As we mentioned in the Pete Rose episode, not just for individuals, but sometimes for organizations, there are organizations that have contentious dynamics, and that is somehow part of the weird, ugly competitive spirit that somehow creates greatness.
Like they're driven by their angst, not only with their teammates, but their fiery manager, and then you got to contend with the press as well.
Yeah, who are like jackals. They want to turn anything into a big story and into controversy. The modern day idea of trying to get clicks, on social media, that's all the New York. And so if they could take something and twist it to make it seem like it was controversial, so it made a good juicy story in the New York Post, they would capitalize on it. And Reggie Jackson truly thought that the New York media was absolutely out to get him. And in some ways they were, they helped to create some of that contention,
They did, for sure. Absolutely, they did. But so often, Reggie was his own worst enemy.
Yes. We heard a lot about, well, what a butthole Pete Rose was. And you hear about other players who have, who are problems. But I don't think Poznancy really gets into what a jerk Reggie Jackson was personally.
Yeah.
Reggie had a problem in 85 and 86. I can't remember, was it the 85 playoffs or the 86 playoffs, but he had a hurt hand.
Yeah. And this is in Anaheim now towards the end of his career.
That's right. And there was kind of a mystery as well, what did Reggie do to his hand? And it was presumed that it was a baseball injury, but it wasn't. There was a female reporter in Anaheim who had a Hall of Fame vote. And Reggie Jackson was just a colossal jerk to her on the regular. And California Angels players John Candelaria and Don Sutton at the time had kind of vowed to stand in between Reggie and this sports writer. Reggie was, really kind of savaging this woman. And then one day, Reggie just changed his tune and was really nice and was really cooperative and, was really polite to her. And then she eventually figured it out. Oh, I've got a Hall of Fame vote. And so she told Reggie Jackson, Reggie, I realized why you're being nice to me now is because I've got a Hall of Fame vote. And you want to get unanimously elected to the Hall of Fame. But I'm going to tell you right here and right now, that is never going to happen. There's nothing you're ever going to be able to do that's going to get me to cast that vote for you. Don Sutton and John Candelaria had to get in between Reggie and her to keep Reggie from ripping her head off. And when they did, Reggie responded by punching a brick wall. And that is the reason that the Angels, and I can't remember if this is the 85 season, the 86 season. I think it was the 85 season. Great Angels team in 85, but that's the reason that Reggie couldn't play in the playoffs that year is because he had a tantrum, being a selfish player, and slammed his fist into a wall. And I'm going to say one other thing about Reggie Jackson on a personal level. So, Twitter, now known as X, I used to have a baseball account called The Big Clue, who incidentally, Ted Kluszewski from the Cincinnati Reds was my dad's favorite baseball player, not Pete Rose. Ted Kluszewski was. And so because Ted Kluszewski hit the first home run in California Angels history, actually it was the Los Angeles Angels back in 1961, I thought that was kind of a fun trivia point. So as my Angels fan account, The Big Clue was kind of my nickname. Well, one day I go into my notifications and I find that the Reggie Jackson has followed me. Somewhere in one of my phones, I have a screenshot of this isn't real. And then I look and this Reggie Jackson account has 250,000 followers. And I'm like, this is the real Reggie Jackson that followed little old me, presumably because he thinks I'm Ted Kluszewski and doesn't know Ted Kluszewski's dead. But that's not really the reason. Reggie Jackson followed me and I was ecstatic. I'm like, what? Why? How? And then I get a personal message that Reggie Jackson sends me his autograph catalog of all the things that I could pay for $500, $1,000, $1,500. And of course, I didn't buy anything. I love Reggie Jackson, but I didn't have that kind of scratch for memorabilia. And as soon as you don't buy anything from him, then he unfollows you.
Oh, sure.
And he would do that over and over and over to people, just basically having a racket of following you, trying to see if you'll buy memorabilia or autograph stuff, and then unfollowing you ultimately. I mean, it's a little petty, but the stories go on and on. I mean, there was a time in Oakland where there was a fist fight that Gene Tennis had to get in between and pull this minor player off of Reggie Jackson. I think it was a pitcher. I can't remember the guy who beat the crap out of Reggie Jackson, but Gene Tennis had to pull because Reggie Jackson was such a son of a bitch to his teammates and so arrogant that this whole drama from New York, it never quit. It was in Oakland, it was in New York, and finally it followed him to Anaheim. So that's one thing that there's a hell of a lot to talk about. Like you said, there's not enough mustard to cover this hot dog.
Oh, yeah. Like you said, you could go on and on with stories about this guy. But, I think we've made the point. Reggie was a superstar. Maybe, like you said in your hot corner, maybe the first superstar in the TV era. He was a winner. He was a big-time baller. And apparently his talent and his fame went to his head a bit. And he ruffled a lot of feathers along the way.
Controversial, but then again, now let's go back to the same thing that we said about Pete Rose. You wouldn't be Reggie Jackson if you weren't too big for your own.
Yeah, that's right. There's something there. There's a certain element that makes it all click in a specific way.
You wouldn't be able to pull this off. You wouldn't survive. You would, and like some of this ugliness, it's not to defame Reggie. It's just to kind of help illustrate that some of this greatness has this strange, ugly underside that you just kind of have to accept that this is what...
Well, I think it's how they're wired, and I think that's what Pete Rose and Reggie Jackson have in common. And we started this show off with how these two are quite possibly the two biggest personalities in baseball history. And looking back on how we spent this hour talking about them both, I really do think that there's something innate in both of them that drove them to be what they became.
Yeah, that's right. And it sometimes eats you alive, and it drives people away. Now, from what I understand, that, not Pete Rose, but Reggie Jackson, he's, got a solid family. He's, gets along with people. So it's not like Reggie doesn't have a life. And of course, he didn't have the same end that Pete Rose did, but...
yeah, I mean, Pete was dealing with a lot more, too. Reggie was belligerent, but he didn't have the same kind of scandals that Pete had to deal with, Anyway, before we close this one out, I think you wanted to mention something about his strikeouts.
I just wanted to mention the strikeout list. So the top 3 strikeout kings in Major League Baseball: Adam Dunn at 3 with 2,379, Jim Tomei with 2,548, and Reggie at the top of the list at 2,597. Now, that sounds bad, but the thing you need to understand about that strikeout rate, even though that Reggie is a strikeout king, is that he was often, by managers and players alike, accoladed as one of the smartest hitters anybody had ever met, because Reggie Jackson was the type that would strike out on purpose on the second inning on that curveball to get you the idea that you couldn't lay off of it or that you couldn't take. And so,
what a sneaky bastard.
Yeah, and so I'll punt on this third inning at bat, because I'm going to see this same guy in the middle of the, bottom of the 6th, and I'm going to hit him.
It's an ambush tactic, and it's pretty ingenious.
And if you look at the big moments, I don't know how many huge moments that Reggie Jackson has. I mean, he's got these colossal home runs, but you don't get the moniker Mr. October for just doing well in the series. You get it for these massive World Series moments.
No doubt.
And so that's part of it, is that Reggie was a very shrewd hitter. If you look at the stats, it doesn't always say the total story, but Reggie was clutch, if you believe in that sort of thing.
I do. I'm one that does believe in clutch, and it's one of those intangibles that doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. But for the guys that have it, there's something a little extra special about them, especially when the lights are a little brighter in the postseason. Quick stat correction before we close it out. It was the Kansas City Athletics that drafted Reggie in '66, not the Oakland Athletics.
For more segments like this, check out our full episodes on any podcast platform. We are the Baseball Book Club. Thanks for listening.